My friends, one of the great paradoxes of the spiritual life is this: the more you attend to what God has planted deep within you, the more the world around you begins to find its harmony. We live in a time when distraction is constant. Our attention is scattered among countless screens, voices, and pressures. Yet beneath all of this noise, there is a center within you, a place where God's image shines. To focus on yourself in the truest sense is not selfishness, but rather the discovery of who you really are in relation to the one who made you. Think of it: when a wheel spins, it can only move rightly if its hub is solid. If the center is fractured, the spokes collapse, and the wheel cannot roll forward. So too with our lives. If the inner life is neglected, our relationships, our work, even our joys become unsteady. But when you tend to the soul, through prayer, reflection, and growth in virtue, the outward patterns of life fall into place. This focus is not about indulging the ego. It is about discipline, clarity, and alignment. It is learning to listen to the still, small voice of God within. It is allowing your inner life to be ordered so that you can radiate peace and strength to others. When you focus on yourself in this way, you discover freedom. Freedom from comparison, freedom from restlessness, freedom from the endless need to control. And then, almost mysteriously, everything begins to arrange itself. Friendships deepen, work takes on meaning, challenges become opportunities for growth. You find that by anchoring yourself in what is true and good, the world around you is drawn into greater harmony. So, do not be afraid to enter within, tend the soul, shape your habits. Let God illuminate your heart, for when you focus on yourself, not in pride but in truth, everything indeed falls into place. True focus on self is not selfishness but self-discovery. It is a turning inward, not to inflate the ego, but to uncover what has always been placed there by God. When most people hear the phrase focus on yourself, they imagine self-indulgence, pampering, or a retreat into isolation. But in the Christian tradition, to focus inward is to go on a sacred journey into the very ground of one's being, where the image of God resides. Think of the words from the book of Genesis: "We are made in the image and likeness of God." That truth means that deep within us is a spark of the divine, an imprint of God's own life. To focus on yourself in this sense is to seek out that spark, to uncover it, and to allow it to illuminate the rest of your life. Selfishness, by contrast, is a narrowing of the soul. It is the ego curving in on itself, demanding recognition, comfort, and constant approval. It leaves the person restless, endlessly chasing affirmation from the outside. But self-discovery is expansive. It opens the heart outward, because when you discover the divine image within, you cannot help but see it mirrored in others. That is why the saints, who were so deeply focused on their own interior lives, became radiant lights for the world. Consider a figure like Augustine, who turned from a restless, pleasure-seeking youth toward the depths of his own heart. There he encountered God, and from that encounter, he changed the course of the Church and Western civilization. Or think of Teresa of Avila, who described the soul as a vast interior castle, with many rooms leading ever deeper to the throne room where God himself dwells. Her focus on the self was not narcissism. It was discovery of the indwelling presence of God. When you focus in this way, you begin to notice the layers of distraction that have covered over the divine image, the noise of the world, the endless comparisons, the fears and anxieties. All of these are like dust upon a mirror. The task is to clear them away through prayer, meditation, silence, and virtue. As the soul becomes clearer, the reflection of God becomes sharper, and with that clarity comes freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of other people's opinions. Freedom from the constant drive to prove oneself. Freedom from the attachments that keep us chained to fleeting satisfactions. This freedom is not escape. It is not running away from responsibilities. Rather, it is the freedom to engage with life more fully, because you are anchored in something deeper. The person who has discovered the divine image within becomes steady, like a tree planted by streams of water. Storms may come, winds may blow, but the roots are firm, and from those roots comes fruit: love, patience, kindness, courage. The paradox is that when you focus on yourself in this true sense, everything else begins to fall into its proper place. Relationships take on harmony because you are no longer clinging to others for identity. Work becomes meaningful because it flows from a centered self, not from a frantic need for success. Even suffering is transformed because you can see it through the lens of a life grounded in God. This is why the command to know yourself has echoed through both philosophy and spirituality for centuries. To know yourself truly is to know the God whose image you bear, and to know that God is to discover your deepest identity. Would you like me to now continue this expansion into a *** conclusion ** that ties everything together, or leave it open for you to close in your own words? Inner order leads to outer harmony. Like a wheel depends on its hub, life depends on the soul's stability. When the hub of a wheel is firm, the spokes radiate outward with balance, and the entire structure can turn smoothly. But when the hub is cracked or loose, no matter how strong the spokes may be, the wheel wobbles and eventually collapses. So it is with human life. If the soul is disordered, if the inner life is neglected, then everything we build around us, relationships, work, ambitions, will sooner or later show signs of instability. We see this often in the world today. People pour immense energy into the outer forms of success. They work tirelessly to achieve wealth, recognition, or influence. They polish the external image, crafting how others perceive them. But if their inner life remains fractured, if the heart is restless and the soul untended, then eventually the outward facade begins to crumble. Stress, conflict, and dissatisfaction creep in because the hub has been ignored. By contrast, when the soul is ordered, when the heart is aligned with truth and goodness, the rest of life begins to move in harmony. This does not mean the absence of hardship. It means that even in the midst of difficulty, there is stability. A person with inner order becomes like a compass always pointing north. Circumstances may shift, storms may rise, but the direction remains steady. This inner harmony then radiates outward. It touches friendships, bringing patience and understanding. It shapes families, bringing peace into the household. It influences work, turning labor into a vocation rather than a mere struggle for survival. In fact, the most effective leaders throughout history have been those with strong inner centers. Their authority did not come merely from power or position, but from the weight of their character, from the stability of their soul. People are drawn to someone whose life is integrated, whose actions flow from a deep and ordered center. Think of a musical instrument that is finely tuned. When the strings are stretched to the right tension, when each part is aligned, it produces harmony. But when the strings are neglected or stretched unevenly, the sound is discordant, no matter how skilled the player may be. The human soul works the same way. Order within creates harmony without, and this order is not something we can fabricate through sheer willpower. It is cultivated by turning to God, by allowing divine grace to enter the deepest part of ourselves. Prayer, silence, and reflection help us to hear the still small voice that calms the storm within. Virtue disciplines our impulses and gives shape to our desires, and slowly the soul is brought into alignment. When that alignment is in place, life does not feel scattered. We are no longer pulled in 1,000 directions by every demand or distraction. Instead, we live from the center, from that inner hub, and because of that, our outward actions become coherent and meaningful. This is why so many spiritual teachers insist that the real battle is within. Win that battle, bring order to that space, and the rest of life will follow. Do you want me to keep expanding these reflections into the ** remaining key points, one by one ** in the same narrated style until they together form a complete 6,000-word sermon, or would you like them as ** individual 600-word meditations * for each point? Distraction scatters, focus integrates. Attention to the inner life gives unity to relationships, work, and purpose. We live in an age of distraction. Our eyes are pulled to endless screens. Our ears are filled with 1,000 voices competing for attention. Our minds leap from one task to another, never settling, never resting. And when the soul is scattered in this way, life itself feels fragmented. We rush from obligation to obligation, but without a clear center. We begin many things but finish few. We speak often but listen rarely. We achieve much in appearance but feel little satisfaction in reality. This is the nature of distraction. It divides the self, leaving us unfocused and restless. But focus, by contrast, integrates. It draws the many threads of life into a single fabric. It gathers the scattered pieces of our existence and binds them together in meaning, and this focus begins not in the outer world, but in the inner life. When the heart is still, when the soul is attentive, then even the busiest of lives can move with clarity and purpose. Consider a river. When water is spread thin across the ground, it becomes a swamp, muddy, stagnant, without clear direction. But when water is gathered and channeled into a single course, it becomes powerful, cutting valleys, turning wheels, giving life wherever it flows. So it is with the human spirit. Scattered attention makes us stagnant. Focused attention makes us powerful, creative, and fruitful. The inner life, tended carefully, becomes the channel through which all other aspects of life flow. When we cultivate silence and prayer, when we take time to reflect on who we are and what we are called to be, then everything else begins to align. Relationships benefit first. Instead of being half present, distracted by our own noise, we begin to truly see the other. We listen with patience, we respond with kindness, because we are not fractured inside. We carry within us an integrated self that can be given as a gift. Work too takes on new meaning. Distraction at work makes labor exhausting. We jump from task to task, always busy but rarely effective. But when focus is present, even ordinary work becomes purposeful. We see how it connects to the greater good. We sense how it contributes to our vocation, to the flourishing of others, and even to the glory of God. Purpose emerges where distraction once reigned. And when relationships and work are integrated through inner focus, life itself becomes unified. No longer are we one person in private and another in public. No longer do we wear masks to please different audiences. Instead, we live from a single center and our lives ring with integrity. This integrity is deeply attractive. People are drawn to someone who is focused, someone who knows who they are and why they are here. Such a person is like a lighthouse on the shore, steady and clear, guiding others through the storm. Distraction scatters us into fragments. Focus integrates us into wholeness, and that wholeness gives peace, purpose, and direction. It is only by tending to the inner life, by grounding ourselves in God's presence, that we can live this way. Would you like me to now expand the next point in the same 600-word narrated style, so that each becomes part of a larger flowing sermon? The ego is not the center. Real focus means disciplining desires, not indulging them. At the heart of so much human confusion lies the belief that the self, as ego, is the measure of all things. We convince ourselves that happiness will come when every personal desire is fulfilled, when every appetite is satisfied, when every opinion is defended, but the truth is just the opposite. When the ego becomes the center, the soul becomes restless. It is like a spinning top that wobbles more the faster it turns. The ego is insatiable. It always wants more, always demands attention, always fears being diminished. And when we live from that place, we are never at peace. Disciplining desires does not mean crushing the human heart or rejecting the natural longings of life. It means ordering those desires so that they serve what is higher, rather than enslaving us to what is lower. Think of a wild horse. Uncontrolled, it can cause chaos and destruction. But when trained and guided, its strength becomes useful, its energy becomes noble, and it can carry its rider to great distances. So it is with human desire. Left unchecked, desire pulls us into endless indulgence, but when disciplined, it becomes the driving force of love, creativity, sacrifice, and holiness. Our culture often equates freedom with indulgence, the idea that to be free is to do whatever I want, whenever I want. But true freedom is mastery. It is the ability to say no to impulses that would enslave us, and yes to what aligns with truth and goodness. It is the capacity to guide desire rather than being dragged by it. This is why the great spiritual masters always warn against making the ego the center, because the ego, by its very nature, is too small. It narrows the horizon of life to me and mine. It treats other people as rivals or tools. It turns love into possession, work into competition, and even spirituality into self-promotion. But when we discipline desire, when we reorient it toward God and toward service, the soul expands. We discover that joy is not in hoarding, but in giving. We learn that meaning is not in having more, but in becoming more. And we realize that the deepest fulfillment comes not from feeding the ego, but from transcending it. This is the paradox of real focus. To focus rightly is not to gaze endlessly at the self, but to see the self in relation to God and others. It is to recognize that I am not the center of the universe, but I am invited into communion with the one who is. In that shift, everything changes. Relationships become freer because we are no longer grasping at others to affirm our fragile ego. Work becomes more fruitful because it is offered as service, not as a stage for self-glory. Life itself becomes lighter because we no longer carry the unbearable weight of making ourselves the center. Discipline is the key that unlocks this freedom. It is not harshness, but love that orders desire. Like a gardener pruning a tree, discipline removes what is excessive so that life may flourish more abundantly. The ego is not the hub that holds life together. It was never meant to be. The true center is God, and when our desires are disciplined and oriented toward Him, the soul finds its rest, and everything else falls into its rightful place. Would you like me to now expand the next point about *** prayer and reflection as essential tools *** into the same 600-word style? Prayer and reflection are essential tools. They tune us to the voice of God within. In a world full of noise, where so many voices clamor for our attention, the voice of God is often gentle, subtle, and easily missed. It is not shouted through the thunder, nor forced upon us with violence. It is whispered in the depths of the heart, waiting for the soul that is quiet enough to hear. Prayer is the means by which we open that inner ear. It is not merely the recitation of words, though words have their place. Prayer is the lifting of the mind and heart to God, a conversation between creature and Creator, a meeting of love, and reflection is its companion. It is the stillness of mind that ponders the movements of life, that discerns where God has been present, that learns to see patterns of grace hidden beneath the surface of ordinary events. Together, prayer and reflection clear the clutter of the soul. They are like tuning an instrument that has fallen out of pitch. A violin that has not been tuned may still produce sound, but the music will be dissonant, strained, unworthy of its design. So too the human heart without prayer. It may still act, speak, and strive, but it is often out of harmony with the deeper truth of its calling. Prayer draws the strings tight in proper measure. Reflection ensures that each note resonates with clarity. When we practice them, we slowly learn to distinguish the voice of God from the many competing voices around us. The world tells us to hurry, to consume, to compare. The ego tells us to grasp, to defend, to dominate. Fear tells us to hide, to avoid, to withdraw. But God's voice speaks with calm authority. It calls us to trust, to serve, to love, to rest in His presence. And it is only when we make time for prayer and reflection that we can recognize it. The saints have always understood this. Jesus Himself withdrew often to the mountains, to the desert, to the quiet places where He could commune with His Father. He taught His disciples not only to preach and to act, but to pray, to pause, to wait upon the Spirit. Without prayer, action becomes shallow. Without reflection, even good works lose their grounding. But with them, every action flows from a deeper well. The parent finds strength to love with patience. The worker finds purpose in daily labor. The friend finds the words that heal. And even in suffering, the soul finds a presence that does not abandon. This is why prayer is not an accessory to life, but its very breath. It is why reflection is not a luxury but a necessity for the soul. Without them, we are like wanderers lost in the forest, moving but without direction. With them, we carry a compass that always points us back to God. The more we pray, the more attuned we become. The more we reflect, the more we see God's hand guiding our story, and slowly a new harmony begins to emerge. Our thoughts, our actions, our relationships, and our very sense of self begin to align with the quiet rhythm of divine love. Would you like me to now move forward with the next theme, self-mastery creates freedom, and expand that in the same 600-word narrated style, self-mastery creates freedom, freedom from comparison, from anxiety, and from unhealthy attachments. At first, this sounds strange, because our culture teaches us that freedom is the absence of restraint, the ability to do whatever we please. But anyone who has lived long enough knows that this kind of freedom quickly turns into slavery. When we indulge every impulse, we become prisoners of those impulses. When we chase every desire, we are dragged endlessly from one craving to the next. When we measure ourselves against others, we are never content, because someone will always appear wealthier, more talented, or more admired. True freedom does not come from indulging the self, but from mastering it. Self-mastery means bringing our thoughts, emotions, and desires into right order. It means learning to say no when the heart demands what is harmful, and yes when the spirit calls us to what is good. It is not suppression, but liberation. Like a musician mastering her instrument, the discipline at first feels demanding, even difficult. But once mastered, the music flows freely, beautifully, effortlessly. So too with the soul. Without self-mastery, we live at the mercy of comparison. We look sideways, always measuring our worth against another person's success or failure. This comparison breeds jealousy, pride, and resentment. But when the self is mastered, we can rejoice in the gifts of others without losing peace. We can walk our own path without being consumed by theirs. We can give thanks for who we are, because our value no longer depends on how we rank in someone else's eyes. Self-mastery also breaks the chains of anxiety. Much of our worry comes from being ruled by desires we cannot control. We worry about losing possessions, about how others perceive us, about whether tomorrow will satisfy the cravings of today. But when desires are disciplined, when the heart is anchored, anxiety loosens its grip. We learn to trust that our worth is not fragile, that life is not about endless grasping, but about resting in the truth of who we are before God. And from that place of rest, courage grows. The storms may come, but we are not tossed helplessly by every wind. We remain steady, grounded, free. Self-mastery also frees us from unhealthy attachments. These attachments may be to material things, to comfort, to relationships, or even to our own image of ourselves. We cling to them, believing they will save us, and in clinging, we become enslaved. But mastery teaches us to hold all things lightly, to enjoy what is good without being owned by it, to love others deeply without making them idols, to accept loss without despair, because our foundation rests not in passing things, but in the eternal God. This is not a cold detachment, but a radiant freedom. It is the freedom of one who can give generously because they are not chained by fear of loss. It is the freedom of one who can serve joyfully because they are not preoccupied with the self. It is the freedom of one who can face death itself without terror because they have already placed their life in God's hands. Self-mastery is not the enemy of freedom, it is the very path to it. The one who governs the self becomes free to love, free to create, free to live fully in the truth. Without mastery, freedom is an illusion. With mastery, freedom becomes reality, a spaciousness of soul where peace reigns, and where nothing can enslave the heart that rests in God. Would you like me to now expand the next meditation, ***? When you are centered, life aligns naturally, ***, in the same 600-word narrated style. When you are centered, life aligns naturally. Peace flows into friendships, into work, and even into challenges. The human heart longs for stability, for a place to stand that is firm amid the shifting sands of life. But so often we live scattered, pulled in opposite directions, anxious and divided. We rush from one task to another, one expectation to the next, hoping that if we juggle enough pieces, somehow life will come together. Yet the secret is not in constant motion. The secret is in finding the center. To be centered is to live from the deepest part of yourself, that place where God's presence grounds you and gives shape to all you do. It does not mean perfection. It does not mean the absence of struggle. It means that in every situation, you return again and again to the inner stillness where you know who you are and whose you are. When you find that center, something remarkable happens. Life begins to align. The many pieces that once felt disjointed, scattered, and in conflict slowly begin to work together. Peace begins to flow outward like ripples on a pond. Friendships are the first to be touched. A centered person brings calm into relationships. They are not desperate for approval, not threatened by difference, not consumed by insecurity. They can listen deeply, forgive generously, and love without fear. People feel safe around someone who is rooted. They sense that they are not dealing with a shifting personality but with a steady soul, and so friendships deepen, trust grows, and peace spreads. Work too becomes transformed. So many people labor anxiously, driven by ambition or fear. Their work becomes a burden, their energy scattered. But when you are centered, work takes on a new character. It is no longer about proving yourself or clutching at success. It becomes an offering, a participation in something larger. Whether the task is grand or small, it flows from a stable place, and therefore it carries meaning. Even routine duties take on dignity when they are performed from the center. Challenges, too, are seen differently when you live this way. Ordinarily, challenges unsettle us, throwing us into panic or despair. But a centered soul meets difficulties with composure, not because the problems vanish, but because the heart is anchored. A tree with deep roots can endure the storm. Its branches may sway, its leaves may be stripped away, but it stands firm because it is grounded. So it is with the soul that is centered. When loss comes, when conflict arises, when the unexpected strikes, there is pain, yes, but not collapse. There is grief, but not despair. There is struggle, but not chaos. For the one who is centered draws strength from a deeper well, and that strength flows into every circumstance. This is why peace is not found by controlling every detail of life. It is found by ordering the heart. When the center is firm, the outward structures fall into place. When the inner life is steady, the outer life harmonizes, and in that harmony, peace flows naturally into friendships, into work, and even into the challenges that once seemed overwhelming. Would you like me to now expand the next meditation, ***? Virtue strengthens the self, ***. asterisk asterisk, in the same 600-word narrated style. Virtue strengthens the self. Habits of honesty, patience, and courage keep the soul steady. We often think of virtue as something optional, as if it were an ornament added to life once everything else is in place. But in reality, virtue is the very backbone of character. Without it, the soul is weak, tossed about by every impulse and every passing wind of circumstance. With it, the soul stands firm, steady, and resilient. Virtue is not a single act, but a habit. It is not simply telling the truth once, or being patient for a moment, or showing courage in one decision. It is the repeated choice, the steady discipline, until goodness becomes second nature. Just as an athlete builds muscle through daily training, the soul builds strength through the consistent practice of virtue. Take honesty, for example. A dishonest person lives in constant tension, always guarding their words, always fearing that the truth will be exposed. But the honest person, even if the truth is difficult, carries a certain freedom. They do not need to remember what they said or hide behind masks. Their words and their heart are aligned, and that alignment makes the soul strong. Patience is another virtue that steadies the self. Without patience, we are slaves to frustration, always reacting, always restless when life does not bend to our desires. But with patience, we endure trials without losing peace. We learn to wait with trust, to suffer delay without despair, to hold steady when others crumble. Patience does not remove struggle, but it makes us unshakable within the struggle, and courage, too, is essential. Life will always present moments that test the soul, moments when fear whispers that we should retreat, moments when risk seems too great, when the cost of doing what is right feels unbearable. Without courage, we shrink back, and our lives grow smaller. But with courage, the soul expands. We face the darkness with light. We endure hardship with dignity. We step forward even when the path is uncertain. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Together, these virtues, honesty, patience, courage, are like pillars holding up the structure of the self. They keep the soul steady amid change, loss, temptation, and trial. And virtue does more than protect us. It radiates outward. The honest person inspires trust. The patient person brings calm into tense situations. The courageous person stirs others to rise above their own fears. In this way, virtue strengthens not only the self, but also the community around us. And the beauty of virtue is that it grows with practice. The more we choose truth, the more natural honesty becomes. The more we endure with patience, the less anger controls us. The more we step forward in courage, the less fear enslaves us. Over time, the soul becomes steady, resilient, luminous. It is no longer at the mercy of moods or external circumstances, but anchored in a deeper strength. Virtue is not a burden. It is the very path to freedom and stability. It shapes the self into what it was always meant to be, reflection of God's own goodness, steady and strong, able to stand firm in the face of whatever life may bring. Would you like me to now expand the next meditation, asterisk asterisk? The inner life radiates outward, asterisk asterisk, in the same 600-word narrated style. The inner life radiates outward. When you are ordered inside, you become a source of order for others. So often we imagine that influence comes from force, from position, or from wealth. But the deepest influence does not arise from what is imposed on the outside. It flows from what is cultivated within. A calm soul calms others. A peaceful heart spreads peace. A life aligned with truth silently calls those around it to alignment. This is the mysterious power of the inner life. It is never contained to the self alone. It always radiates outward. Think of a lamp placed in a dark room. It does not announce itself with noise or demand attention with force. It simply shines, and in shining, it changes the entire atmosphere. Those who enter the room can see, not because the lamp calls out to them, but because it fulfills its nature. So too with a person whose inner life is ordered. They become light without needing to prove themselves. They bring clarity simply by being who they are. We all know what it feels like to be in the presence of such a person. When we encounter someone who is inwardly grounded, who is not scattered by distraction or enslaved by ego, something within us settles. We find ourselves breathing easier, speaking more truthfully, seeing more clearly. Their presence awakens in us a desire for that same inner steadiness. By contrast, when we meet someone who is disordered within, their chaos spills outward. Anxieties infect the atmosphere. Frustrations poison conversation. Selfishness drains energy from others. The inner life cannot remain hidden. It always expresses itself outwardly, whether in peace or in turmoil. This is why tending the soul is not a private matter alone. It has communal consequences. When you become ordered within, you offer a gift to your family, to your friends, to your workplace, to the entire circle of your life. Your words carry weight because they rise from integrity. Your actions bear fruit because they come from clarity. Your very presence becomes a stabilizing force in a world that feels so often unsettled. This does not mean perfection or the absence of struggle. Even those deeply grounded face storms within. But their choice to return again and again to their center, to live in truth, creates a consistency that others can trust. It is like the anchor of a ship, mostly hidden, unseen beneath the waves, yet keeping the vessel steady amid the wind and tide. So too the inner life anchors the outward one, and that anchor provides stability not just for the self, but for all who sail nearby. Parents know this instinctively. Children are deeply shaped by the atmosphere of the home. When parents carry peace, patience, and integrity within, that order radiates outward, forming the hearts of their children. Leaders too discover this. A leader who is centered and ordered creates stability for a community, but a leader consumed by inner chaos sows disorder in every direction. The pattern is clear. The condition of the soul is never neutral. It either radiates harmony or it radiates disarray. When you are ordered inside, you cannot help but become a source of order for others. You become a steadying presence in a noisy, fragmented world. Your life becomes like a quiet stream that refreshes, like a lamp that illumines, like an anchor that steadies. And in that way, the inner life, faithfully tended, becomes not just personal, but profoundly communal, a hidden well from which many others may drink and find peace. Would you like me to now expand the next meditation, ****? Focusing inward is the path to fulfillment, ****, in the same 600-word narrated style. Focusing inward is the path to fulfillment, not chasing the world, but allowing God's design to unfold. From the time we are young, we are taught to look outward. We are told that happiness lies in achievements, in possessions, in the recognition of others. We chase after careers, status, wealth, and approval, believing that if we can gather enough of these, our lives will finally be complete. But the more we chase, the more restless we become, because the world always offers one more thing, one more level, one more goal just beyond our grasp. And so the soul grows weary, running after promises that never satisfy. True fulfillment cannot be found in the endless chase. It is found by turning inward, by discovering the quiet place where God has written His design upon the heart. Each of us is created with a purpose. We are not accidents. We are not defined by what the culture demands or by what others expect. We are shaped by God, called by God, and held in God's plan. And that plan unfolds not when we force it, but when we surrender to it. This is the paradoxful. Fulfillment comes not by grasping, but by allowing, not by chasing, but by receiving. not by measuring ourselves against the standards of the world, but by living in harmony with the one who designed us. Focusing inward is how we come to know this design. When we pray, when we reflect, when we listen in silence, we begin to hear the voice of God guiding us. We notice the gifts He has placed within us. We recognize the desires that point us toward our true calling, and we distinguish them from the false desires that only lead to emptiness. And slowly, we learn to live in alignment with what God intends. When this happens, fulfillment follows. It does not always look like worldly success. Sometimes it leads us down paths that seem small in the eyes of others. But even in those hidden paths, there is joy, because we know we are walking in the way meant for us. The soul that lives in this way is at peace. It does not need to grasp at every new trend or prove itself with every new achievement. It does not crumble when the world shifts or when others fail to applaud. It is grounded in something deeper. It is free. This freedom is what makes fulfillment possible, because when you are no longer chained to the chase, you can finally receive the life God wants to give. You can love others without needing them to complete you. You can work with joy, not because of the rewards, but because the work itself is an offering. You can face challenges without despair, because you know they are part of a larger design. And you can rest, truly rest, knowing that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Focusing inward is not withdrawal from the world. It is preparation to live in it more fully. It is the discovery of the wellspring from which all true action flows. And when you drink from that well, you find the fulfillment the world cannot give, the fulfillment that comes only from walking in God's design and allowing His plan to unfold in you day by day, moment by moment, until your life becomes what it was always meant to be. Would you like me to now weave all these expanded meditations into a single flowing sermon with an introduction and conclusion, or would you prefer to keep them as separate lone reflections? Here is a suitable ending in the same style as the rest of the speech. My friends, the journey inward is not about closing ourselves off from the world. It is about finding the true center where God dwells, and from that center, allowing life to unfold in harmony. When the soul is ordered, everything else takes its proper place. When the heart is tuned to God, peace flows outward into relationships, into work, and even into the trials we face. The world tells us to run faster, to chase harder, to grasp at whatever promises fulfillment. But the gospel tells us to be still, to focus, to listen for the voice of God within. For when you focus on yourself in the truest sense, on the self created, loved, and called by God, everything else indeed falls into place. So let us turn inward, not in selfishness, but in discovery. Let us tend the soul, cultivate virtue, and live from that divine center. And then, like a lamp in the darkness, our lives will shine with a light not our own, a light that brings peace, order, and joy to the world around us. Would you like me to now, combine all the expanded parts with this conclusion, into a single, polished sermon, style speech for delivery?